Okay, welcome everyone, and very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, The Ins and Outs of Library On and Offboarding, presented by Darcy Armstrong. She is the Public Service Manager at the Eckhart Public Library. After the webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's archive webinars page. If you are watching an archive recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. So let's get started. I am now happy to turn the presentation over to Darcy.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Hello, I am Darcy Armstrong, Public Service Manager at Eckhart Public Library. And just want to give a brief overview of what this morning is going to look like. We'll talk about onboarding, some definitions, some rationale, and the different stages that comprise the onboarding process. And then I'll share examples of our most recent onboarding process at my library. And then we'll do the same with offboarding and go on to questions. So I just want, and you can respond in the chat, but think back to the last time you started a new job. How was your first day or your first week? And was there any kind of orientation? How was it structured? And how long before you really felt settled and part of the team? So onboarding it's welcoming and integration of a new employee. It's imparting of skills, knowledge, and behavior, but there's 4 different aspects to it, really. There's that orientation aspect that includes an introduction, a tour. It's all of that information, right, about your new job. There's the legal aspect, that is the paperwork. There's job-specific training, and there's a socialization aspect. And I think that's a part that gets missed a lot because what you're trying to do is communicate the culture of your organization. So we had a response in the chat about starting a new job, work from home even before the pandemic. Yes, we joke at our library that you're not really an employee until you've accidentally set an alarm off. Yes, onboarding is overwhelming. It is. So doing it properly takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to set up. And why should we devote that much time to it? To make it a positive experience for new hires. That leads to staff retention. And it's also a really valuable source of information for your organization. New perspectives can help you see things about your organization that you're missing, that you're blind to, or just bring in new ideas. And onboarding should actually start before your first day. So part of that is that planning. So you're coordinating with any staff who need to be involved. You're getting those checklists ready so that you don't miss anything. A solid welcome email is really important. So anything that can be done before that day. So some of the boring stuff, like maybe, I say boring, but maybe manual reading, certain trainings that could be done, some paperwork that could be done prior to their first day, and then send an agenda. People should know what to expect for their first day and their first week. So the second part of that process is the welcoming. That first week, follow your agenda as much as possible, but build in plenty of downtime because, again, and I can't stress this enough, starting a new job is incredibly overwhelming. That process is really overwhelming. And we need to give some space for the information to breathe and for the new employee to breathe. Give tours and introductions of your entire organization. Involve the rest of the staff as much as possible. And I think that's really important because when you're in a larger organization, there may be some people that your new employee doesn't often interact with. And so you're making them feel a full part of the team, and you're allowing your other staff an opportunity to shine, to share their work and take some ownership over that. It's also really helpful for new employees to see all parts that make an organization function. Give the other employees a heads up though, because that interruption could also be overwhelming to them. I see in the chat, we did round robins the first 2 weeks I started, and I got to talk to all the department heads. It was really nice. Yeah, it's a really good way to build that culture and build those relationships. And speaking of building, a lot of times those orientation and training sessions can be an information dump. So rather than dump the information, we really want to build it. So we start generally and get more and more specific. Yeah, peer training has a very positive impact, both in skills, but also for socialization. Yeah, that socialization aspect, I feel like it gets missed a lot, right? And that's where the culture aspect of onboarding comes in, that we have kind of the written stuff, that's the mission, vision, and history component of the organization. So ideally, they already know the mission and vision of your organization because they applied for and were hired to do that job. But we go over that again, and as well as sharing the history of an organization. Libraries are very proud of their history. We're no exception. And especially now, a lot of our staff are not from the town that the library is in. And so communicating that history is really important. Setting out what the organization expectations are for how we use technology and how we communicate, always important, but I think especially now, if you're, maybe you have a hybrid model set up where maybe some of your staff are working remotely part-time, how we talk to each other really needs to be set. For example, we have email, we use Google Chat. We have some specific ways we use each of those things. And I'll get to that when I share examples a little bit later. And then communicating those unwritten rules, right? It's like the lunchroom norms. Where do we park? For my library, we have a staff association, and this is it's a fun committee that plan events for staff. Most recently, we every year, for example, we do a pie competition for Pie Day. I don't mean to brag, but I did win this year. Yes, but allowing the staff association, thanks, Katie. Allowing the staff association the opportunity to come in and talk about those things involves people in that culture right from the beginning. And then there's that job specific training, which the most important thing about that, I think, is that it never ends. The training never ends. We like to say that we get to the end of our maybe 90-day probationary period, but your culture should hopefully be one of continuous improvement and continuous training. And I think that will help new employees to feel a little more comfortable once they've kind of met that 90-day, they're at the end of that 90-day period. So assume they know nothing. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that I have made when onboarding new employees, that just because they come from a library background or another library that maybe uses the same ILS, that doesn't mean they know the ins and outs of your organization. assume they know nothing and don't rush through things. I think that's probably the second biggest mistake that I have made, that we kind of want to get through it, right? We want to get through the onboarding process so they can be a full employee. Assume they know nothing. It's going to take time. Define what success looks like. Show them what the position, what an average day in the position looks like and how to do it well. And the best way is really a blended approach for that. We have everybody, read policy, read the procedures, but we also use training videos that can all be referred back to later on. There's an assessment component to that. There's demonstration and hands-on learning. And I think I missed something in the chat with, scavenger hunt. New trainees do a scavenger hunt. Yeah, it's a great hands-on learning tool. Build in a lot of time to check for understanding. Another way we have done it is shadowing certain employees. So you have a new hire, maybe shadow someone on a public service desk, or just assign the new employee another staff member as a mentor. And how long you do that might depend on their own comfort before they start flying solo. But it's really important too to give the new employees an opportunity to start making an impact in the organization, and to show them that we trust them. And then the next phase of onboarding is transitioning to a full staff member. So there's that probationary period. You have your 30, 60, and 90-day reviews. All of those should be documented. They are a really great source of information, not just on how the employee is doing, but how the rest of the team is doing with this transition as well. So this is an example of one of our checklists for new full-time staff. And so it has all of that. What do we do before the first day? Where is all the paperwork? Has it been completed? We have policies that people must read. And so we sign and date all of those things. This is the less fun part. So the most recent, our most recent onboarding, for the first time since I've been involved in this, we sent our welcome email with things that could be done ahead of time. So we had their start date, but we also sent links to handbooks, policies, and pre-recorded trainings that they could get started with, so that when they came in on the first day, some of that stuff was already taken care of and we could really get to the culture and the training. The other thing we did was, like I mentioned, we use Google G Suite. We gave them access before they started. They were paid for that work, yes. And we put that on, yeah, they were paid, because it's still work, right? Yeah. They were given access, they got their Google logins, and so they could start interacting with staff kind of immediately. We had employees track their time before that date. So this was our agenda for that first week. So we had all of the paperwork. We booked a lot of time for the tours, made sure to take their staff photos that day, and took our lunch break together. It is, I think it could be disorienting for a new employee to have all of this time on their first day or their first week with all of this information, and then be, okay, well, we're going to leave you alone for lunch in half an hour. So having lunch with the employees was really, really nice. Yeah, it was a good way to start building the team. It was a good way to get to know each other. And it was just a nice break in there. And it set a more relaxed tone, I think, than not doing it. And we did start right away that week with some shadowing or some training, but it was very much broken up. So there's just building in that downtime, follow-up questions and review and practice each of those days. And allowing the training with different staff members was important too. That I like the idea of the round robin from earlier in the chat. And so this is a screenshot of our training resources. Like I said, we use Niche Academy for some of our staff training. It's really helpful for me because each video has an assessment component to it. And so I can see where staff might have more questions about something. And it's also always available. So staff can go back and relook at something that they might not necessarily do every day. Okay. And then those 30, 60, and 90-day reviews, those are really important because you can document successes or areas of concern. Those reviews ideally should be open-ended questions. It includes kind of a way to kind of a temperature check on how the staff member is doing and feeling, but it's also an opportunity to give job-specific feedback and find out where you can give that manager support. Each of those reviews should include goals. I like to have the staff member set their own goals, and then I might, or a supervisor might, have additional goals for them. And it's also an acknowledgement of the work they've done so far. So these are some of the review questions that we've used. How is working here met or not met your expectations? What do you like about your position? What do you feel is particularly challenging? Can you identify any challenges that you've had? Have you been made to feel part of a team, and how? What can we provide to help you do your job better, or how can I help you in the future? What are your goals for the next 30 days, which is one I didn't put on there. And then the job specific feedback, of course, based on the essential duties of the description. We just take the job description and go through it and offer that direct feedback or intervention if necessary. Okay. On to offboarding. Think of the last time an employee left your organization. How was it communicated to staff? How was the employee treated? What happened with that employee's knowledge and responsibilities? So offboarding is the process that completes the end of a professional relationship. It's the end of the employee's time working there. Ideally, it will be a smooth transition, but circumstances are going to be different for every departure. They're the three reasons that offboarding should be done well: is security, knowledge management, and retention. Because some people might leave and come back if it's an amicable split, right? Okay. So there are different steps that are suggested for offboarding. Why the person is leaving is going to have an effect on the speed and the order of those steps. So it's important to understand the nature of that person's exit. A retirement is a lot different than a termination. Regardless of the nature of the exit, communicate the change quickly. The direct team should know as soon as possible. And ideally, you've built that culture where information is shared. Hopefully someone, it's not somebody who leaves that is the only person who does this one thing, and they're the only one who knows how to do it. That communication, quick communication has, there are emotional reasons for doing that, because it could be shocking if somebody is leaving, but it's that knowledge retention. And if possible, treat employees warmly. If possible, give them a memorable farewell and allow them to leave with grace. So those are the steps, right? Communicate the change to everyone who would be involved. Figure out when to communicate that with the rest of the staff as well. Complete all the necessary paperwork, transfer that knowledge, recover assets and restrict access. Offer an exit interview, and the exit interview ideally should be offered to every employee, regardless of their reason for leaving. It's a really great way to get information about your organization that, again, you might be blind to or you might have missed. And then celebrate, if possible. Celebrate their achievements and the work they've done. Celebrate their new position. In the past, we've done different things where we've had different times we've had a party for a staff member who's leaving, or their team might take them out for a lunch with the manager. Retirement parties are another thing we have done before. And so a word about exit interviews. There's a right time and a place to do them. So the more relaxed, excuse me, the more relaxed the atmosphere, the better. And ideally, it's not the direct supervisor who's conducting it. We want to encourage open conversation and have some set questions and let that be a guide, but don't let it stifle the entire conversation, right? Exit interviews will tell you, you could get to the root of why somebody is leaving. And if there are workplace issues that need to be solved, that's a really great way to get that information. Use that knowledge that you get. So some of our sample exit interview questions we've used. In what ways do you believe your work was appreciated and recognized? Did you feel supported by your manager? And I realize that is not an open-ended question, but when we ask a yes or no question, we'll ask to elaborate. How would you describe your training? What could be done to make this library a better place to work? Okay. Onboarding and offboarding, they are the bookends of the employee experience. They both require a significant amount of coordination and pre-planning. The more structure, the better, but don't let the structure take over the process and the flow. And both onboarding and offboarding are valuable sources of information that help the organization evolve. We've gotten feedback on certain things that have completely changed the way we do training, for example. People come in with ideas and experiences that make the organization better. And the onboarding and offboarding experience, that evolves. Just the way we did it most recently is very, very different from the way we've done it in the past, and I think for the better. Yeah. And So I have a lot of time for questions or people just sharing what they have done and what's worked for them.
You can probably see them in the chat without me reading them. You want to go ahead and we haven't really had any questions other than comments.
Okay. Let's see. When you use niche for training, did you create those specific to the position? Ideally, yes, that's what we want to go for. That where we can, there'll be a niche academy series for maybe technical services. What we have right now is just for public services, but every employee pretty much works a public desk, and that's what gives people the most scary feelings. I think that there's just a lot of circulation and reference. So I was able to make video with screen share, or screen capture rather. And so they can see the demonstration and refer back to that for every task that would be circulation related. Yes. "30, 60, and 90-day review questions." I think, do you get honest answers in the exit interviews? I think I can answer my own question. I really think you must have a really trusting culture. I really like the idea of radical trust. I want to hear everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We haven't done in-person exit interviews since the pandemic. We haven't had somebody leave in that capacity where they were able to get where we were able to schedule the exit interview. So sometimes we'll just send the questions to them, and then they can just type whatever they want to. And I do think we get honest interviews. You'll get more honesty again if it's not the direct, if it's not the direct supervisor or their direct manager. And some of it can be hard to hear. And but you're doing it to better the organization and better the employee experience.
Let's see. Now it's going quicker, just a second. Any specific advice for onboarding a new intern?
Honestly, I would do it very much the same way. It might be a shorter onboarding experience depending on the nature of their position, but I would do it the same way. That if we want to improve the culture, there needs to be a basis for everybody's training, and if we want them to feel part of the team, we need to include them in those things.
Okay, we've had a comment from Natasha. She says, my experience on that is that those organizations that don't want to hear it just don't do exit interviews, or people don't answer the questions because they know the organization doesn't care.
Yeah.
How long is your training onboarding with new employees?
I think I would say the whole onboarding process goes through that 90 days and beyond. And I've read a lot of just things that people have said that it really was a year maybe before they felt at home in a new position. But I would say the really intensive, everything is scheduled, would go for about 2 weeks. And then it's okay, you've had 2 weeks, now we're gonna let you go. That's where the mentoring and the shadowing pretty much take over, instead of everyone sitting together. So I'd say really that intensive 2 weeks, but the onboarding goes on for at least those 90 days.
Yeah, another person said, Stephanie said that they've been burned by being honest, offering suggestions. Also the exit interview, I've The only exit interview I've ever had was on a form and not actually looking for any info.
Yeah, it's you have to decide if you're, as an organization, if you're, what culture you want and how employee feedback figures into that. And to decide those things means you might, get some feedback that makes you not feel good, and that's okay.
Another question from Susan: if the direct supervisor does not doing the exit interview, who does? A different supervisor, direct supervisor, or a more senior colleague?
Yeah, I would say another team's supervisor.
And I was going to also ask this myself, or just to clarify, how many employees does the Eckhart Library have? The size of your library?
30, I want to say 30, and I should know the answer.
Oh,
and
okay.
I don't. But yeah, it's around 30. And yeah, with small staffs, it seems very hard for people to find time to create or adhere to training guides. That's part of why the mistakes that I mentioned that I've made in onboarding, smaller libraries or mid-sized libraries, smaller staff, it was hard. It was hard to do those things. That's why you want to rush through them. How to find time to create or adhere to training guides. I would say you have to block time off. If you're a manager, we overhauled our like public service manual and procedures to make things based on feedback from staff members that, again, wasn't easy to hear. But we did it, and the public service supervisor and I just had to block off like 2 whole days where we didn't do anything else. That might not be doable for everyone, depending on the size of your library, but you have to don't let it be a task that is an if I have time. You have to make time to do it. Getting people to adhere to training guides, that's a different story, because one of the things that about training that I have seen is teach from the systems. When you're training a new employee, train from the systems and not from the experience. So whatever training guide you come up with, that's where you want to start their training. And so some of that sounds like it needs to be tightly controlled, because there's that meme that you've seen where, well, this is how you're supposed to do it, but this is how we really do it. You want to have your, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but that's when you're training from the systems, you're training the way that it should be done. And if you've really taken feedback from your staff and baked that in to your training guides, you'll have less of that. Well, this is how it says to do it, but this is how we really do it.
Yeah, someone else was saying that their HR manager does the exit interviews and then reports back to the direct supervisor, which again, depends on the size of your library if you have that HR manager. This is a question I also had. Is it best to give the exiting employee the exit interview questions prior to meeting with them?
I think that's a good idea because it gives them time to think. And not everyone is going to have a response right off the bat.
Okay. Is your onboarding process different for full-time versus part-time staff?
There were certain times where we split the new full-time hires from the part-time. There was different paperwork involved. But for the most part, it was the same.
I had a question. How long has the Eckhart Library been doing this system?
This is pretty new. We hired several new people last fall, and we've had parts of this that we would use. But it hadn't been as structured or stretched out as this. And that really was taken from feedback from people whose onboarding maybe was a little too rushed or could have happened a little bit better.
I think this is excellent for any size library. If you can do this, this is amazing, because like I've only had onboarding formally like at my present job, and I've never had offboarding. So I think that's great. Someone's got a question or wants some suggestions on how to handle an employee who is getting close to retirement, short number of years, not immediately, but doesn't want to participate in knowledge sharing to pass on their specific knowledge to others.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
a tough one.
Maybe that's good for the rest of the people in the chat. I'm actually myself, I am thinking about putting together a panel on directors who are in the process of getting ready to retire or have retired, what their processes were. So we could maybe add that to the questions or topics. Succession planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are getting ready to retire again. So yeah.
I think Julie's suggestion is a good one. Ask why. Are you afraid of being pushed out? Do you feel, I think that's a lot of it, that people think if I have to share this information with someone, I become expendable. And so they want to really protect their position. If you can frame it as you're sharing knowledge, from a position of wisdom, that might help it a little bit. Also, I would, look at the person's job description too. If, look at what your culture is. If it says that part of their job is to share that information or that communication component, that might be, make it a little more, let them know that it's a little more imperative that you have to share your information.
Yeah, I like the suggestion about make it a larger effort if all key roles are asked to formalize their job task documentation. They might not feel singled out. So that would be a win-win for the library. Yes, yeah, for everybody. What is the manual that they had everybody do at all the libraries to document who does what? We have directors. What is the name of that? I can't think about what the SBOA, I think, or had people do. Internal controls. So yeah, that should be a part of internal controls, I would think. And I think there is a video that goes along with that. Oh, okay. Well, I think at this point, we're probably going to stop the formal presentation. So I want to say thank you so much to Darcy for doing this presentation with us today. And as a reminder, if you are watching an archive recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. So we can go ahead and stop the recording.